chapter 1, and this week we really will end. We stopped at verses 29 to 31 of chapter 1. And I guess it's okay to go at a slow pace because we are not in a rush to do anything. Um, and as Romans is actually a very difficult book, I think the slow pace is good. And ended last week on verse 28. And verses 18 to 28, those 10 verses, were all about how the Gentiles who do not believe in God behave. And actually, it is not just about Gentiles, it's about all human beings. Because as Paul develops his arguments, you realize that he's talking about everybody, even though the early church, there would be Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians all worshiping together in Rome. And there was still some division. And so Paul in this letter, as I mentioned in the introduction, is trying to bring the Roman Christians together as one church, whether they are from a Jewish background or from a Gentile background. So chapter 1 is, after all the introduction and salutations and all the greetings, is about how the world of people have turned away from God, and God is going to do something about it. And Paul uses the word orge, which is anger, which is wrath. The wrath of God will be revealed to those who sin against him. But it is verse 18. And I mentioned verse 17 is the good news that because of the evil of the world, God has revealed also his good news, the gospel of God in verse 17. And the gospel of God in verse 17 is about righteousness, how we achieve righteousness. And it is a righteousness that is achieved not by works, but by faith in Jesus Christ. So we had this long discussion on how human beings, as they turn away from God, they do worse and worse things, and God gave them over. God delivered them over to do what they want to do. And it is, on the one hand, looking like God doesn't care, indulgence, you want to do it, go ahead. But Paul makes it very clear that this giving over, this letting go, is for the consequence that will come from rebelling against God. There will be consequences, natural consequences. And these natural consequences actually Paul refers to as the wrath of God. So the judgment of God in this first instance in chapter 1 is not about God sending lightning to zap you and you're in the middle of a golf club and golf course and God zaps you with the lightning. No, not that kind of punishment. Yeah. So God says, you want to do your own thing, you will get the consequences and you will know it. And Paul focused in 2 verses, 26 and 27, on homosexuality. And I mentioned that it was not because it's really, to him, the biggest sin that you can commit. It wasn't anything like that. It was more of God has a natural order in creation, Genesis. And Paul is giving this as one very clear example of how the natural order of God in his creation is totally distorted by human sin. And so homosexuality is just an evidence of how when people go against nature and God's natural order, they end up with their own activities, I guess, and their own beliefs, and then they have consequences from that. And of course, homosexuality has got health issues connected to that, and also social issues connected to that. But I ended by saying it's not as if this is the only sin and the biggest sin, because as far as Paul is concerned, we're going to look at the list that he lays down in verses 21 to 32. And you know quite clearly he doesn't mention about homosexuality again or even sexual sins again. He talks about just the whole atmosphere of rebellion against God. which includes some very, you might say, in modern thinking, innocent things. See, one of the arguments that people have today in Canada and North America is that homosexuality is really about love. It harms nobody, and it's in fact a way of loving somebody. This list includes things that maybe modern people might say, is that a sin really? It doesn't harm anyone. And why should it be a sin? Okay, so I will spend some time with a list of sins that are listed here in verses 29 to 32. The list begins in verse 29 with, and the NIV, you've got, some of you have got the 2011 edition, some of you have the 84 edition, and the words are slightly different. For one thing, it's because the Greek original word can be translated in many ways. I think you have realized it from the previous sessions. As I teach, I mentioned that different English translations will use different words. So even the translators of the NIV, they were not happy with the 84 translation. Then they changed it in 2011 because they feel that some other English word would be a better way to translate the Greek word. So the list begins with 4 general evils, you might say. And many of the words are, you might think, are synonyms. They mean the same thing, right? So why does Paul repeat himself? We'll go through that. So verse 29 in the 84 NIV edition translates the first four sins as wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. 4 very general sins. General in the sense that evil can mean so many different things, right? Whatever you do that is harmful to somebody else is bad, is evil. So if you try and steal, if you try and cheat, you try and cut a line, yeah, that's being rude, but it can also be bad because maybe people have been lining up in that line for a day and you come 5 minutes ago and you want to cut into the queue, and that happens, right? I'm sure in Canada, but I know in Singapore, whenever they have this McDonald's promotion, like a Hello Kitty toy is given with every burger, and people will line up 24 hours before, yeah, and sleep overnight in the line so that they will be the first to open when the doors open, right? So imagine Peter is the very first one there. He's been sleeping overnight, and then I come along and say, "Hey, sorry, hi Peter, how are you?" And I talk to him, and then when the doors open, I walk through first, right? Oh, what did I do? Did I do anything evil? Yes. In a way, yeah, right? But I maybe I'm taking advantage of Peter. He knows me. Maybe looks like me like a teacher or a pastor or something. Is okay. Let it be. It's okay. I'm not going to fight over this. So he's not harmed, right? I'm not harmed. He's not harmed. So who's harmed? How about the other people all waiting down the line? Yeah, they lost one number, right? So sometimes in our lives today, we can downplay bad things to a point where no big deal, right? He just got a Hello Kitty before Peter, so no big deal. So you find that this list includes general words like evil, wickedness, greed, and maybe what I did was just greed, right? I want to get the Hello Kitty first and then maybe sell it on Amazon.com for twice the value. I got it for free actually, but there's a market value and I sell it at twice market value. I made money. So sometimes that's really greed. So the first 4 words are general words. The first word translated in different ways in different translations. Translation in NIV 84 is wickedness, but many other translations in English would use the word unrighteousness. And if you look at the Greek word adikia, there is that root of dikaiosune, which I mentioned earlier on, righteousness, in verse 17. And there's root of being right. Okay, so the good thing is being right, and the bad thing is being not right. So unrighteous, unjustness, the word also can be translated justice. So injustice in this case. So being unfair. I was unfair to Peter. I was unfair to all the people down the line who have been waiting for 24 hours, sleeping overnight. So that general term, unrighteousness, doing the wrong things, not being right, not being fair, not being just. So that's the first word adikia. And in the Greek, when you have an a in front, it means the opposite of, right? So amoral, for example. Moral is all the moral rules about right and wrong. And when somebody is amoral, he's got no right and no wrong. Yeah, he's got no morals. And not that he has no morals, but he doesn't care about morals. In his world, there is no such thing as moral. So he's amoral. So adikia, unfair, unjust, unrighteous. Poneria is the next word, and that is translated evil, wickedness. And since NIV has already used with the word wickedness, it translates the second word as evil. And then the third word is about greed. It is about covetousness. So that's easy to translate. And it happens also to be one of the 10 commandments. Do not covet. Do not be greedy. Do not look to desire somebody else's belongings and wife and animals and so on, right? So that's the 10th commandment. And the fourth word, kakya, these are four nouns actually, and the fourth noun is actually also translatable as malice, but it's a kind of malice which is intended to be harmful and damaging to the person you're doing it to. So anything you do which will harm another person is to Paul a sin too. So these four general sins. Then the next list is of 5 very specific sins, and the name is, the nouns are there. These are all nouns also. The first one is envy. And so somebody could be full of envy, jealousy, human spite. Human jealousy is very spiteful. And the next word is murder. And if you look at the beginning of this phrase, it says these people are full of envy. Okay, they're very envious people, full of murder. Now, how are you going to be full of murder? Hate. Yeah, because Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, that when you hate somebody in your head, when you are angry with your brother in your head, you already murder. And of course, people murder by first thinking about it, the plan, and then they go through all the scenarios, and then when finally one fine day in a dark street you meet this enemy of yours, your plan is all inside there, you result in an action. So what is inside your head becomes a reality. But Jesus says the sin is not the act, the sin is already thinking about it. So full of envy, full of murder, full of strife or contention, somebody who has a disposition of fighting all the time, quarreling all the time, arguing all the time. And you might say this is a quarrelsome person. And how is that a sin? I can be quarrelsome sometimes, especially when people get me on the wrong side of the bed. I get out of the wrong side of the bed and they get on the wrong side of me. I'm going to be very angry, right? Is that a sin? Why is that a sin? I didn't harm anyone. I just, maybe at the most I get a big stomach ulcer because I'm angry all the time. So It's a list that is maybe not so acceptable to some people. And then the last word in this set of 5 is again a word that can be translated malice. It is a maliciousness that um, maybe it's an attitude, how you treat people, how you think about people, and you're always full of malice. So, first of all, you're filled with evil. Second 5, you're full of different things. Murder. And murder is again the 6th commandment. Deceit. So one of the 5 things here is deceit, lying, cheating. And that's also the 9th commandment. Well, so far, you find that something like greed may be not obvious to people and may not be manifested in action. You can be a greedy person, but nobody knows your head or your heart. It's inside you. You can be an envious person. It's inside you. You have never showed your envy or jealousy, perhaps. People do not know you're really a very envious person. And the worst part of it is you could be an envious person and you do things behind people's back and they don't even know. You're two-faced, right? You call them two-faced. In front of you, they are very nice, but behind, they do all kinds of things to you because they're envious of you. Maybe they talk bad behind you. Maybe they make, they are the boss, so they make arrangements in such a way that you don't get the best assignments. All the bad assignments go to you, and you may not even realize it. Right? You just think, oh, that's part of the job, right? I get all the rough things. And so that's a list of 9 things. They're all over the place, right? Different things. They don't seem to be any category at all. And in fact, this whole list, the Romans, the Greeks, the Jews at this time, first century AD, they're very happy to have lists like that. So all the philosophers will have lists of good things that you should look for, virtues they call them, and lists of vices, bad things. So they would put up lists. And Paul himself in the New Testament, he has put up different lists. There are different lists from different places like Galatians. There are lists in Timothy and Colossians and so on, right? So Paul himself gives different lists in the rest of the New Testament and not necessarily the same things either. So this list is, I guess, random and representative of the many things that people do wrongly against God and against human beings. So against God, idolatry, against human beings, injustice and immorality. Okay, so going on in verse 30, so verse 29, the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the last part of verse 29 and beginning of verse 30, you've got 2 words, gossips and slanderers. 2 words that seem again synonymous. They mean the same thing. What's the difference? In Greek, the first word translated gossip or gossiper actually refers to a whisperer. A whisperer. So, when I was a teenager and I was introduced to this game called Chinese Whispers. Have you heard of that game, Chinese Whispers? So you have a long line of people all lined up. Oh, yeah, like a yeah. So I will whisper to Alice, let's say a full sentence. Um, Nima is an Iranian engineer, let's say, yeah? Okay. So Nima is an Iranian engineer, and Alice didn't quite, maybe she doesn't know Nima, so she didn't know that was a name. So Hima, and then she said, Hima, Hima is an Iranian. Yeah, and she forgot the last word. So engine, and he goes around, and by the time it gets to Claudia, maybe all she hears is, he may be a good man, but he's not. Because they've gone around the room, and by the time it gets, yeah. So that's whispers, right? You whisper, and it changes, and the story changes. And whisperers, gossips are people who whisper. Then it spreads out. By the time it gets to the last person, the whisper is a totally different whisper. So gossips do a lot of harm. You may whisper because hey, don't let others. Please don't tell others. I'm just telling you. I just found out. No. And it may be a good thing. Nehemiah is a good Iranian engineer. It may be a good statement, and it comes out at the end totally different, right? So the danger of some harmless thing like this is it can cause a harm that you don't even realize. You launched it and you do not know the consequence. And Paul lists this together with all the other sins, including homosexuality. Is there a bigger sin or a smaller sin? In God's eyes, every sin is the same size. Big or small, every sin is too much for him. Whether it's a small sin or a big sin, whether it harms anybody or not. And a slander is talking bad about somebody, but publicly. In a newspaper, on the internet, and Facebook. And this is where I always tell Christians, please do not forward or repost anything you have not verified. Sometimes it's just in case it's true. I want to help my friends. And in the early days of Facebook, I very frequently, because I'm a lawyer, I'll get somebody repost a legal, or don't do this because it's illegal or da. And I say, rubbish, where do you find this law? It's not true. Tomorrow Facebook is going to invade your privacy, and therefore, we must throw back the Uniform Commercial Code number 234 at them. And I'll go on and say, Uniform Commercial Code is about buying and selling. It's nothing to do with Facebook. But people, it's like without verifying, without knowing whether it's true or not, they just push on. Same thing we do with WhatsApp. Hey, Mark Carney, it's election time. Mark Carney just said this. Do you know that? And put forward, and then Mark Carney never said anything like that. So this is, I think, in many elections, all kinds of slanderous things are said of the candidates. And what happens then is we, as Christians, need to be careful. If we forward something and we disagree with it, and it's true, then you can add your comment. He just said this, and that's not right from my Christian point of view, right? Whatever he said, if it's true, any candidate. So this also is true whether you say privately, as in a gossip, or publicly, as in Facebook or newspapers. It's equally lying, it's equally damaging to the person you're talking about. And I mentioned, I think it was last week, right, that sometimes Christians beautify the gossip with, let's pray. Somebody, Yutan is da, and let's pray for her, right? It's actually a piece of gossip we passed on. Did you know Stephen, he did this? Let's pray for him. So be very careful, right? We do not want to do that, because in God's eyes, even the small things like that are really big things to him. And the word slanderous here can also be translated. Actually, it's more like not just saying bad things about something, but somebody who's very insulting. It covers a person who is very insulting in their conversations, in their speech. And there are people like that, right? We know people who, the moment they open their mouth, is sarcastic, it is negative, it is just insulting. Why do you have to talk to me in such an insulting way? Does it harm me? Well, it doesn't cause any blood. But sometimes, as they say, words can hurt more than blows, right? Hurts Words can hurt more than a blow, a physical blow. So be very careful. James himself says in the letter that he writes in the New Testament, James talks about how the tongue is a small little organ, but it can do huge damage. And that is sin, on the same category as homosexuality and all the other evils and unrighteousness. The next word in verse 30, haters of God, is all by itself. And actually, it covers everything above and everything below, right? Because basically, the whole idea is if you hate God, you will not follow his standards, and therefore you do all kinds of evil as long as it's good for you. You don't care about how bad it is for somebody else or how bad it is for God. So the Greek word originally can also mean hated by God, but most scholars and translators say this in this context, it's a list of things about things you do, things you don't do right, and so it's not hated by God. Evil is hated by God, but it's more of the person hating God. So a God hater, an atheist, a person who is always fighting against God, and you could say this violates the first 4 commandments, which is all about God. So you can see so far, even though the list includes some of the commandments, in fact, it doesn't include every single commandment. And there are some things that are not a commandment. The next word on the list in verse 30 is insolent. The Greek word is hubristas, from which we get the English word hubris, Hubris. Hubris is about exaggerated pride, exaggerated self-confidence. You know, there are some people, they whether they are powerful or not, it doesn't matter. They act powerful, and they, nose is in the air all the time, looking down on others. They have an exaggerated sense of themselves and their value, and they will come and kiss my, that sort of thing. So that hubris, I am so big, everybody else is so small. And in fact, the next 2 words, so this list of 3 words, being insolent, being arrogant, being boastful, in English, these are all synonyms, right? And this is where perhaps they form a class of, so slanderers and gossipers form a class of people who use their mouth for horrible things, to do horrible things, to say horrible things. And this list of 3 words are people who think so highly of themselves that they are at the very least, insufferable. It is a pain to know people like that. They may not hurt you, but somebody who's always talking big, you know, Sam, what do? You're an engineer. Oh, I'm a bigger engineer than you. You build cars, I build rockets. Elon Musk. They think of themselves so big. Maybe they are big, but not that big. And so people like that. And the NIV says insolent. The word can also mean people with an attitude, overbearing. It's just so annoying, and they are always trying to make you look small. The attitude of superiority is there, and this attitude of superiority can sometimes lead to mistreating other people. And they may be your colleagues, or they may be your helpers, they may be your students, and they're lower than you in that sense, and you take advantage of them and you abuse them. So that's the kind of people here in this class. Arrogant, so proud, they have no humility at all, and boastful as in pretentious pride. Being, sometimes you can boast about the good things. It can boast about good things, like Paul says, he's boasting about being a Jew, being a Hebrew of Hebrews. You can boast about your relationship with God. I have a close relationship with God. And if it's a reality, God himself boasts about his relationship with Abraham and David and all, right? They are my friends. So there is a good type of boasting, but the boasting here is a reference to the pretentious boasting. Nose in the air, I'm so big, you're so small. So this class of sins, you might just give one word for it, and it's called pride. Pride was the sin of Satan, and he fell from heaven. He was an angel created by God for good. He fell from heaven because he decided that he was better than God. So pride took over. Pride is the sin of the Garden of Eden. Because the devil says to Adam and Eve, hey, you know, there's so many good things here, and God is stopping you from having them. See, he told you not to eat from that tree of knowledge of good and evil, because he doesn't want you to know good and evil. The moment you know you're like him, you're God, you might as well be God yourself. Why do you have to depend on him? So the Garden of Eden sin is really about pride. I am self-dependent. I don't need God. Pride is the beginning of, and the Bible says that too, of your downfall. Pride goes before fall, the English proverb, right? The next two words are actually pairs of words and translated with a phrase, right? So, inventors of evil. General category, there are people who, you know, all the evil things that have ever been done on earth, they can invent new ways. They can invent new ways of doing evil. Maybe a new way to do pornography. Maybe a new way to take a drug. Maybe a new drug. You know, they're evil and they create evil, and they are so proud that they can invent evil. And even turn good things into evil, right? Because, for example, it can create a game. A game can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. But addiction to a game is a bad thing. But sometimes the game itself, maybe a violent game, maybe a sex game, maybe it is a game that encourages greed. Gambling is a game that encourages greed, to get something for nothing. So you can even turn a good thing and invent an evil thing out of it. And the next one, in North America, many people don't see that as a sin, right? Disobedient to parents. Yeah. In Asia, we're still very big on this sort of thing, right? You have to be obedient to your parents, and people might say you're over obedient to your parents. Even if your parents are wrong, you don't tell them they're wrong. And sometimes parents become very overbearing. Maybe sometimes I use the word smother. You know, the mother's love is so strong that it smothers you. So there could be parents like that. But the Bible, specifically the fifth commandment, says, honor your father and mother. Of course, so that, you know, there's a purpose behind honoring your father and mother. But there is no qualification. It doesn't say, the commandment doesn't say honor your good father and mother. Honor your father and mother only if they are not evil. Honor your father and mother only if they love you back. It's just simply honor your father and mother. And in an individualistic culture like North America is, Canada, USA, it is overwhelmed and overshadowed by this anti-authoritarianism in the culture. I don't listen to anyone. They do not know what to do with my life. I know what to do with my life. It's my life. None of your business. So the individualistic streak then ends up with, I have no authority over me, including my parents. They're not my authority, especially now I'm above 18, right? Legally, I'm an adult. They have nothing to do with me. And as I said, a 7-year-old tells her mother, somebody I know, tell the daughter, she was so broken. Chinese mother, the daughter at 7 years old says to her, "It's my life." Canadian schooling teaches you that at 7 years old. It's very sad. And in the name of helping Canadian students learn to be independent and right thinking and not be influenced by others, you end up anti-authoritarian, which means when the government tells you to put on a mask because it might spread COVID, you say, no, you have no right over me. You have no right to tell me to mask up. I do what I want. So that streak of anti-authoritarianism begins in the home, disobeying the parents. And why is it in the 10 commandments, the structure is first 4 commandments are about God. You shall have no other God. You shall have no idols. You shall not use the Lord's name in vain. And you shall honor, one day in 7 as a rest day, the Sabbath day, because God rested, therefore you rest. So the first 4 have got to do with God, worshiping God on Sunday, worshiping Him only and no idols, and honoring His name all the time. And the 5th commandment, the rest of the 10 commandments have got to do with human beings. And the first of the 5 human being oriented commandments, the first is honor your father and mother. There has got to be a purpose to that structure. And that purpose is after God, your parents are your authority, especially when you are young. And if you begin to disregard the authority of your parents, you will begin to disregard any other kind of authority, including ultimately God's authority. It begins small and it grows and grows. Maybe it begins at 7. By the time you're 17, there's nobody on earth that can tell you what to do. Very sad state of the world. And speaking, I'm a guest of Canada. I cannot be too critical of Canada, but North American culture particularly, and Western Europe is also not too far behind. Slightly better than America, but not that much more. Disobedient to parents, is that really a sin? Paul says it is. In the same class as inventor of evil. Finally, in verse 31, 4 other sins. Even the NIV translators not sure exactly how to translate it. 84 version is different from the 2011. I like the 84 translation better actually. It says, I'm having the 84 edition here. It says, they are senseless, faithless, heartless, ruthless. And in the Greek, they actually rhyme. The first 4 sins rhyme. The last 4 sins also rhyme. So Paul has got a bit of poetry here. The 4 sins in verse 31, there is a translation, a New Jerusalem Bible, I think it uses very interesting words to translate. So these are people without brains, without honesty, without love, without pity. Very general, but can you imagine somebody, can you think of some? So without brains, it's not meant to be an insult on an intelligence, really. I think in the Bible, when the Bible uses the word foolish, and that's some translators put, I think ESV uses the word foolish. A person is foolish in the Bible when he rebels against God and he doesn't want God's wisdom. So what is foolishness in man's eyes is wisdom in God. And what is wisdom in man's eyes is foolishness in God's eyes. So the foolishness is a mind that doesn't think the way God thinks. A fool is, in other words, a moral and spiritual fool, not an intellect kind of fool. God makes us, we have different brain powers, right? But it's still quite graphic to say these people are brainless, meaning they have brains, but they don't use the brains to think what is right and what is wrong. And one example of a person who doesn't think about what is right and wrong is you follow the crowd. If everybody does it and you look at the crowd, 10 over there, 2 over here, I go with the 10. Safety in numbers. If they're wrong, there are 10 others wrong with me. If I'm wrong here, I have only 2 others wrong with me, and it's not a very safe number. I'm going with the crowd. So brainless is not using your brains to decide what is good and bad and making your own decision. In that case, Canadian culture is right. You should make your own decision and not follow the crowd. So brainless actually is, and NIV translates it senseless in the 84 edition. Senseless is without common sense. Yeah, no common sense. Lacking insights and understanding about life. Is that a sin? Well, in God's eyes, it is. Because you are using your brains that God gave you, and you're not using the brains that God has given you to decide what is right and wrong. You just follow the crowd unthinkingly. Okay, senseless, brainless. The second word is faithless, and that is very, very strong theme throughout the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament. God says, I'm faithful, so you must be faithful. And in verse 17, we talked a lot about faith, being righteous by faith. God is faithful even when we are not faithful. So faithfulness is a very strong attribute of God. And here, Paul says some of the bad things we do is because we are not faithful to our promises. We are not trustworthy. Okay? We are not trustworthy. And that's why the other translation is without honesty, without integrity in our work, in our lives. We don't care if we have to lie. And of course, there will be people who will say, not all lies are bad. There are white lies and there are black lies, right? So I tell a white lie. It's because, I don't really want to tell you you're really so ugly. So I say, you look okay. My wife and I, we always joke, I cook something and I ask her, is it nice? She says, it's interesting. She didn't say it's nice. She said it's interesting, and it's true because I like to experiment and put all kinds of flavors and some strange flavors. And she goes, it's interesting." So we don't call that a lie. And you tell a child, you just fail the exam, it's okay. It doesn't mean you're dumb. And we mean to encourage. But if the child didn't work, and that's why the child got 0 for the exam, you got to tell the child, you know why you got 0? It's not because you're not dumb and all the other things you do to encourage. You have to actually say, you failed because you did not do any work. And Stephen and I, we teach, right? And we're talking about how when we have students, the students want us to give them marks and they want us to pass them without any effort. I paid my school fees, so therefore you must pass me. I don't know about Stella, she's a teacher too. I don't know whether she faces that problem. I paid my fees on time, so I need to pass.
I don't know if you notice after COVID, this is very common.
Very common, huh?
Students have that mentality.
Wow.
Before COVID, it was better. After COVID, now it's really terrible.
Are they Canadian students or
Canadian, international? They all think that
all the same.
All have that mentality.
So we're not alone.
Yeah, we are not alone, Stephen. Yeah, because I have students, and I tell them, you come to class. They don't come to class. The parents paid a lot of money for them to come to school, and they don't come to class. And I say, I have assignments for you. Each week you come, I have an assignment for you. Make an effort. At least submit your answer to my question. At least a quarter of the class never even bother to submit. And I said, how can I give you grades when you don't even submit your homework? And Stephen was telling me some Canadian school systems would say it's their life. They don't want to do anything, don't force them.
Yeah, the attendance policy. So as instructors, we're not supposed to threaten the students. Maybe that's not accurate, right? We shall not strongly encourage students to come to class. That it's their decision.
It's their decision whether they want to come or not. Yeah.
Yeah. If a student comes to complain that, oh, this instructor says I have to come to class, then the mistake will be on the professor.
Yeah. So if the professor says this class is compulsory, it's the professor's mistake to say that.
Yeah, so we can only welcome them. When they come to classroom, we welcome them. Yeah. But if they're staying outside of the classroom, we can't say, come. No, we can't say that.
You cannot say.
Let's see.
So is it? Yeah. So in the end, you've got.
Free spiritual.
Yeah, the free spirit is it's anti-authoritarian, which God doesn't like. God needs us to be disciplined and faithful. So, I mean, one way as a professor, I have a course outline, and sometimes it's not my course outline is given by the school, and I'm being faithful to the course outline. And the student says, "Why are you teaching me so many things?" Teach me less, so I have fewer things to study for the exam. You cannot digest. But I'm so glad you're here because I give you a lot of stuff, yeah, and you're listening. And I think it's important to realize that when we rebel against standards, not just God's standards, even human standards, when we rebel against authority and standards, then we decide to live on our own, and it's never actually good for us. So you come for 4 years in college and go out, and we are pressured to give you a degree, and you go out and you know nothing about the subject you studied. How is it going to help you in the rest of your life? So I actually have got very sensible students who say to me, I come here to study. I want to learn from you, professor. I don't want to just pass an exam. So please make me work. And I think in Asia, I teach in Asia, so it helps. The Asian students are better in that sense that they have been taught from young, authority is good, and your teacher is your authority. Canada is the opposite. The teacher is not an authority at all. The teacher has no right to tell you what to do.
That's why the best culture is now.
Yeah, and the culture, yeah. Okay, so as the switch. So as Christians, I think we have to look at what God says and then examine our lives and our cultures and our societies and know where it is going wrong. And I'm going to talk about this a bit more. The things that we have to do to change it. It's what God wants us to do, right? So when Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5 that we are to be the salt and light of the world, I think it's very clear that salt has a function of preventing meat from rotting, right? Decay. So society decays morally, worse and worse. Our job is to be the salt that prevents society from rotting. Salt flavors our food. Our job as Christians is to flavor the communities we are in, our workplaces, our schools, our churches, our families. And salt, besides flavoring and besides preventing rots, there is actually another function of salt which a lot of people don't immediately think about.
Kill germs.
Preservative.
It's a preservative. Yeah, it's the same as preventing rot. So you arrest the rotting, and so it preserves the meat and keeps it longer. Yeah, so it's a preservative.
Kill germs.
It kills germs, so it heals. Salt is a healing agent, and so the Christian is called to be a healing agent in the place where you are. But do you need a lot of salt to do all these things? No need. If you put too much salt in your food, people don't eat it. It's too bitter. It will become very bitter, right? So we need only a very little bit of salt. So we don't need to have a lot of Christians to flavor society. Just remember that. A little bit, a few grains of salt is all we need to preserve the meat, to flavor the meat, and to heal. And so when I get ulcers in my mouth, I take a big lump of salt and I rub it on my ulcer. It hurts like crazy, but it heals immediately because it kills all the germs, right? So I think that's what we do as Christians, that we have to heal society even if it hurts. But the counter to that is not to be arrogant. So the list of things that we read earlier on, arrogance is a sin, pride is a sin. We should not do it arrogantly. I know better than you. I'm superior to you. My nose is looking at you, not my eyes, right? So we don't do it that way. We do it graciously, kindly. We do it in a way which is pleasant, so people would listen to us and love listening to us. So this is where we are faithful, that we're trustworthy. We are known to have common sense, even if they don't believe in God. They know they come to us for wisdom. And the next word on the list is heartless. Okay, it is a list of sins to be heartless. And I guess if you're one of these people, right? You come into a company, you come into a government department, whatever, and you sack everybody because I want to make a new start. Yeah, I suppose you could do that. But you have done it even without checking if any of these people you're sacking deserve to be sacked. I remember when I was a young lawyer and I had to make a decision. Wasn't that young anymore. I was in a decision-making position, and I had a worker that was not performing. So institutionally, professionally, I have to let this person go. You're not performing, and I cannot keep you anymore. I cannot pay for you to make mistakes, and then I have to redo the mistakes you make. So I came back home. I was just chatting with my wife, and I said, I'm so frustrated. I need to dismiss this worker. And my wife says, has he got a family? I don't know. I never asked. I look at the job. He's not doing a good job. He has to go. Why does family come in? And my wife says, well, if you dismiss him and he's the only breadwinner and he's got 3 kids and a wife, you have made 4 people suffer for telling this man he's got no work anymore. And as a Christian, as a boss, you might say, what would I worry about that? That's his business. He messed up his own life. It's not me who messed up his life. But even as a Christian, I cannot be heartless. I have to say, yeah, how do I help him in such a way that he learns to pull up his socks and be a better worker, but not at the expense of his 3 kids and his wife? So I thought about it and I said, okay, I can do this. I go to him and tell him, I give you 3 months to look for a new job. When you finally get a job, you have to leave because you're not performing here. And these are the reasons why you're not performing. So the person leaves knowing why I'm leaving. I didn't do a good job. Why I didn't do a good job. But I have a chance to make it better for my family because I'm given a chance to look for a new job before I leave this current job. And so the kindness is that this person is not immediately thrown into a jobless situation and may not be able to get a job because you are sacked, you're dismissed. Then it's on your CV. Your next boss is going to say, why were you sacked? Why should I give you a job? So I think heartlessness is really, it may say it harms no one. The other person deserves it. I cannot be, I cannot have a lot of heart because I need to get a company going. I need to make money. Because there are 25 other families depending on me and so on and so forth. You could rationalize. And when you're heartless, you can always justify by saying, there's only one person that suffers because I'm saving 25 others. And God says, I am not heartless. Why are you heartless? So being heartless, being loveless, without love, I have no love in my heart. And you may not think it's one of the commandments, one of the 10 commandments, but remember when Jesus was asked to summarize the 10 commandments, it says, love God with all your heart and all your mind and all your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. Love, God is love. The second great commandment is love your neighbor. And not just stop there, because love your neighbor as yourself. So first you must love yourself. And in the way you love yourself, love your neighbor. And I think that's an important qualification because some of us don't even love ourselves. I remember as a young man before I was a Christian, I did not love myself. I hated myself. And there are many things I hated about myself. Other than the physical things, I'm short and ugly and all that, right? I felt I had low self-esteem. So I thought I was not clever like other people, skillful like other people. And I was that way because I'm comparing myself with other people. And so when I came to Christ, I became a Christian, I realized that I am who I am because God made me the way I am. God made me this person like this. So I have to learn to love myself. And when I love myself, it's because I have gratefulness to God. And then the love that God gives me overflows. It's not my love anymore, it's God's love, and it's so much that it overflows, and it's not from me, it's from God. Because John says we love because God first loved us. We can love because we have experienced the love of God. And so, put it another way, if you don't have God, that's why you are without love. You are loveless. You have no heart because God is not in you. And the final word is ruthless, cruel. I remember as a child, I didn't do it. Okay, I didn't do it. But my playmates, my friends, they would catch cockroaches and then they would pin it down and pull off the legs one by one, It's a game. Maybe cockroaches are hateful, so it's okay to do it to hateful things. They pull up the legs one by one. And I'm sure that's cruel. But you have no feeling. It's a cockroach. What do you feel for a cockroach? The bad thing is we begin to treat other human beings as cockroaches too. I don't care if I sack this person and he has got no job. Jolly well go look for another job. He cannot find a job. That's his business, not mine. Being heartless can lead us to become ruthless. We no longer care about people. We no longer care about anything but ourselves. So these are general things. Some of these things begin small and they grow and they grow and they make us horrible people to be with. And God says, this is the list of things I don't want you to be. Not at all. And don't just focus on what looks so spectacular, homosexuality, and we must fight and we must fight very hard about it. But the people who fight very hard against homosexuality, which is a sin, actually are not looking at themselves and the list of things that they are already doing that God does not like at all. And the next chapter will begin, you who judge others, you do the same things. That's chapter 2, verse 1. But anyway, the list here, I wanted to go through it in detail because I want you to see that somewhere inside this list, you have done something. I have done something, many things. And we are, none of us, guiltless before God. And that's what Paul is trying to do here. He's building an argument. And by chapter 3, he's able to say, no one, has been righteous. No one is sinless. And all of us deserve the wrath of God. And all of us need the gospel to escape the wrath of God. Okay? Any questions? Comments?
You mentioned if we don't believe in God, we will not have love toward other people. I know a lot of people in China, for example, right? In China, they're atheists. They don't believe in any God or any supernatural things, but they still have love for their children, right? Most of the parents, they still love their children at least. They might also love other people like family, friends. So, is that contradiction in this?
Okay, so the first thing to do is that Paul is making a general statement in chapter 1, chapter 2. And what general statements do is that not every one of us will have everything in this list. Some of these things, I'm not like that. And many of these things mean that, oh no, I'm not like that. But the point is not about rejoicing about the list of 20 some sins. Only 2 hit me. I got 19. I'm okay. Yeah, it's not a number situation, right? So some people may have, they're very loving, they are kind, they're tolerant, but 1 or 2 things inside this list. Whether you're Christian or non-Christian, Paul is saying you have something in this list.
So that means if I don't, for example, if I don't believe in God, I will fall into some of the things here, right? So I won't be able to innocent from all of these things if I'm not Christian.
Yeah. So chapter 2 will further develop the argument where Paul says, and he begins to address the Jews who feel that they are God's chosen people and they are saved and God will protect them and so on from the devil and punishment for sin and so on. And God says, and Paul says, you will point your finger at others. You do these things also. Again, not everything. You do some of these things. The Jews, for example, would say, no, we hate homosexuality. So you talk about homosexuality, nothing to do with me. Right? Idolatry? No. We worship God. We go to the temple. We love God and one God only. We don't worship idols. So you can exempt yourself. And no, I'm not like that. But ultimately, there is something inside here that is you. And that's me. And we have to look at it and say, yeah, this is about us also deserving the wrath of God and also possible recipients of the good news of God if we turn back to Him. Yeah. So it's again, like I said, it's a random list because there are many other things that are not mentioned here that Paul says is a sin in the other parts of the New Testament. Yeah. So, but in the general sweep, Paul is trying to say that Number one, we have all these things that we do wrong. And if we don't check ourselves, the Bible is like a mirror, right? And you look, oh, yeah, that's me. And if we don't check ourselves, then we will go the way chapter 1 tells us, right? God will let us go. You don't care about me, don't listen to me, I'll let you go. You get the consequences of your own sin. And then hopefully, and chapter 2 will develop this fully, hopefully then God allows you to slowly come to the realization that your sin has caused you so much trouble that you need to turn back to Him and in repentance. Okay, so it's a moving picture, right? Not frozen here.
I have a question.
Yeah, Alice.
Verse 32.
Mm.
Can you give some example who they are? Those people who do such things is that they know it, but they not only continue to do these things, but also approve those who practice them.
Yeah, I haven't come to verse 32 yet. I'm just
I
final.
thought you have
Yeah,
it.
no, not yet. So we're just finalizing the questions on verses 29 to 31, and then I come to 32. Yeah, okay. 29 to 31, the list of things, the questions you have. So it is not, Paul is not saying that every non-Christian does everything on the list. Neither is Paul saying that non-Christians do not have love. In fact, I think in our own experiences, sometimes we feel that there are non-Christians who are actually far better behaved than Christians. Yeah. So it's not a list to condemn somebody, but to say that without God, our minds and our hearts will be in the wrong place. Okay? All right. So back to verse 32. Paul says, so these people who have done these things in that list, these are people who know God's righteous decree, and they know that this disobedience of this decree will lead to death. Okay, so Paul now summarizes, comes to the conclusion that, okay, I've given you a list of things that people do wrong if they don't have God in their lives, and these people know that these things are wrong, and these people also know that these wrong things will lead to death. So one of the scholars put it this way: it is clear to us, and there are people who do uh, studies of human cultures and societies, anthropologists they call them. So there are anthropologists who study places in the world, different countries, and they come to the conclusion that every human society will have some sense of right and wrong. They may have different views of what is right and wrong, but there will be something in every society that says this is right and this is wrong. Eating pork is wrong. Eating grasshoppers is right. And another society, but why eat grasshoppers? You got to be joking. What? I cannot eat pig. You must be joking, right? So we may have different things, different. You don't have agreement on what is right and wrong, but every society will have some sense of something is right and something is wrong. At the same time, you have a list of right and wrong because you know that the wrong must be punished. Because if wrong is not punished, then more and more wrong people will do wrong. So every society has a sense of right and wrong, and every society knows that wrong must be punished to stop it. So with that sort of idea, Paul is saying that everyone who is not a Christian knows something in his or her life that is wrong, something which deserves to be punished. They know, but they ignore it. And As an example, every human society probably has this rule that says you cannot kill another person. That's murder. Murder is wrong. And then some smart fellow might say, but there are hate hunting tribes. There are tribes. Even today in Papua New Guinea, apparently there are hate hunting tribes still up in the mountains, not touched by human society and civilization. They still go around hunting human heads and chopping them off. They don't think that is wrong. But, sorry, hang on. You ask them who they chop. Do they chop off their own families? They will always chop the people from the next village, the next tribe. And the idea is, in many of these hate hunting tribes, you kill the enemy so they have no more power over you. You take off their head, and in East Malaysia, the tribes, there are some tribes that still have got, because they live in traditional villages, they still have skulls hanging on the roof. Because in the days when they were headhunters, you kill the enemy, chop off the head, and hang it in your house to protect your family and your tribe. So it's still a society where you can kill other people, but you cannot kill your own people. Killing your own people is wrong, right? So back to the point, in every human heart, there is this rule that says, I cannot take the life of another person. But they can give themselves excuses. You're my enemy. You're from the next village. You're not my family, and so on. Every human society would have a sense of the rightness of listening to your parents. In the first place, if you don't listen to your parents, you get swallowed up by a tiger. You're living in a place where there are lots of tigers. You don't listen to them, well, it's your own folly. So there's always a sense that your parents know something more than you do. Listen to them until you yourself know what to do. Then you don't need to listen to them. How long that period of listening to them may vary from society to society, but I think every society would have this rule at least. And to be organized, to be safe, to survive, we have to get together. And if we get together, there will be rules on how we behave to each other. The rules may be different from this tribe to that tribe, but there will be rules, and punishment will be given to those who disobey the rules, including the idea that even if human beings don't punish you, there's something up there that will punish you. You get sick because you didn't obey the rules of the tribe, and that's why now you're sick. And so every tribe would then have a shaman, a witch doctor, who then makes it right between you and that spirit that decided you should be sick. Maybe a force. Maybe they see it as a god. Maybe they don't see it as a god, it's a force, whatever. So in the human heart, any society, there is this thing we cannot explain. Chapter 2, we'll talk about this a little bit more when Paul talks about the human conscience and so on, and natural law. Okay? But back to verse 32, Paul says, these people who know something is wrong, they not only do it themselves, but they approve of others who practice them. So I know it is wrong to be anti-authority, but I don't want to be the only one in the crowd who's anti-authority, so I make sure everybody believes that anti-authority is good. So I will promote this idea of anti-authority, and I approve of it. And then if I'm in a position of being a teacher or something, I can make more people believe it. And soon everybody approves of what I approve of, which I know is wrong. But hey, it's my advantage for them to listen to me. So not only do people do wrong, Paul says worse, they approve of what is wrong and encourage others to do it. It's propagate the faith in a way, right? I do something wrong, I make sure others follow me so I won't be alone. And I think, which is worse, probably there are people who may say, I know this is wrong, so I won't do it, but I want to encourage other people to do it so that, I feel good. I'm superior. I don't murder, but I try to encourage people to murder. So wrong becomes right, evil is labeled good, and injustice is justified and maybe even rationalized. You give a good reason why there should be injustice. We should send all the immigrants home because they steal away our jobs, because they make us sick, they bring diseases that we don't have, and so on and so forth. Or to package racism as patriotism, to package prejudice as tolerance. But I'm only tolerating everybody who agrees with me. If you disagree with me, I'm going to call you hate speech. Tolerance. And in some societies, when the majority begins to approve of what is evil, then you are the lone voice now saying this is not right, and you get silenced. Maybe because you're a professor and you want to study this reality of whether there are people who say there is a gay gene, you're gay because of a gene, and so can I do a research on whether there is such a thing as a gay gene? And I find nobody is funding me. Nobody wants to fund me because they dare not be seen to be supporting a project like that. So I get silenced, but I'm also forced into silence because money doesn't come or laws are made to prevent me from even saying Merry Christmas. And so what is right becomes wrong. And what is wrong becomes right. And the people who can say otherwise will be silenced. And that is a very sad world. When people who are in the right are silenced. Or they are so intimidated that they dare not speak anymore. And so this is where we as a church, maybe not individually, we may not have the strength, but we as a church, we as a body of Christ must always be consciously looking at the Word of God and say, this is what God's Word says. There's no two ways about it. Let's find ways and strategies of making this known. We are salt. We cannot do much, but the little that we have, the little that we are, we can slowly flavor our society. So that we end up remembering the Roman Empire was very pro homosexuality. It was the emperor's privilege and everybody's joy to have a homosexual lover. Status, privilege. And the few Christians who spoke otherwise, the voices became more and more influential. And that's why Western society today, until the 20th century, was very clear that homosexuality was not the right thing to do. And it was only from the 60s onwards, the sexual revolution as they call it, and slowly the minds changed again. Back. There's nothing new under the sun. It's back to the Roman times. And maybe because the church has stopped speaking, or maybe the church is speaking wrongly. I believe it is the second. The church is speaking wrongly. Because when you speak, and we'll talk about this now, how does a Christian speak in the public space? We need to speak gently and not arrogantly. We must speak with love and let our love be known. and we must speak consistently. And I mentioned last week, for example, we are, North American churches are so strong against homosexuality, but they close their eyes on divorce, and they close their eyes on adultery, they close their eyes on things which they should equally speak against, and they close their eyes. People would say, you're not consistent. Why are you so big on A and not on B? Paul talks about gossips. Why aren't you big on gossips? Why do you exclude only one type of people and not the other types of sinners? Inconsistency. And
We're human
chapter
beings.
2, Paul will develop this point, especially verse 24. Yeah.
I mean, human beings are limited. We can deal with only one thing at a time.
Mm.
We cannot do all of it.
Indeed. And as a grain of salt, as a human being, you do one thing at a time. But it's tone I'm talking about. Okay? It's not a choice of topic. You may want to focus on one topic because that's your specialty. You're a psychologist or you are a biologist and you have got strong points about strong knowledge about a certain subject. Sure. But I think as a body of Christ, and even as individuals speaking in the public square, I'll talk about this, we need to speak with a loving voice and a gentle voice. But the voices we hear in the public square today are very arrogant, very loud, and very unloving. And I think that's why the world doesn't listen to the church anymore. And the changing of terminology, we relabel sins as things that are acceptable in different ways, right? Giving them different names, or even calling gossip prayer items. I think we need to watch ourselves. Okay, so back to my point about the public square. We need to have Christians who are brave, not ashamed of Christ, not ashamed of the gospel, stand in the public square, whether in politics or as civil servants or as business people in the marketplace, speaking truth to the crowd. Telling, for example, as Christian employers, this is not how we get work done. This is not how we dismiss people. We care. We are not heartless. Or as Christian teachers, to say that, hey, it makes my life easier. You want to pass? I pass you. Doesn't make me suffer. You suffer, but it's not my life. You want to have your own life. I could do that as a teacher, but I persuade my students, look, I may pass you now, but when you go out there without any knowledge, the rest of your life, you suffer. I don't suffer, you suffer. So you need to listen to me now. We can influence even as one teacher. At least, I had a class of 60 last year in this Australian university where I'm teaching, the private university in Singapore. 60 students, and the law in Singapore is very strict. Student visas, you cannot work, and the school will lose its license if it doesn't take attendance. So every student will take attendance, fingerprint, biometric, tick, and they don't turn up in class. They just tick and they go. So I noticed. And then I also noticed something, that the people were using technology. They didn't give, I don't have the details, but apparently there's some software or something that they can do where their friends can tick for them. They don't even have to turn up. Maybe it's something on the fingerprint they stick on or something, and then tick, I take it off, tick. So do I close my eyes and say, I don't know anything, I don't know about it? Cannot. As a Christian teacher, I have to say, I know you guys are doing this. I will call out names in class. If your name is not there, I'm going to knock a 0. I don't care whether you tick or not. the computer says you're here, but I called your name and you're not here. So that prevails over the computer. My class became fuller. I'm told here in Canada you cannot mark attendance. Oh, well, too bad. Maybe the teachers must tell the school, why can't we take attendance? What's so wrong about taking attendance? Anyway, so yeah, even in your job as one person, you can find allies, and there may be allies on the faculty board. There may be allies in the faculty who say, yeah, I've been thinking about this a long time, but nobody spoke, so I didn't speak. So you can start speaking, and then people start speaking with you, and very soon the administration may have to change the rules. Another example in the public square. I think Canada is going for elections soon, and America just had elections. And the joy of a democratic society is that you can cast a vote and choose your leader. Unlike many other countries where the leaders are chosen for you, it's because he's the king and the king appoints his son or his president who has been there for donkey years, and he decides who will be the next successor, and you have no choice. Remember too that Paul and the first Christians in Rome had no choice. They didn't have the ability to vote the emperor. Yet they changed their society. Because even in the little homes they meet in, the 10 and 20 people, as they learn from the word of God what is the right thing to do, they went out and influenced people. They influenced their own families, they influenced their employees, they influenced the business partners. And very soon the slaves influenced the masters, and Rome was changed. The Roman Empire is gone, Christianity survives, because we are not without power. We have the power of God and the power of God's word. And so it's not wrong for Christians to go into politics or to be promoters of political platforms, whatever, knowing that in a democratic society, while we have the privilege of voting, no candidate on earth is going to be 100% the right candidate to support. There are Christians who support Trump, there are Christians who hate Trump. There are Christians who support Mark Carney and Christians who hate Mark Carney. This should not divide the church, because different people see different things in their political platforms. But the ultimate tone must be when we are involved in politics, whether on one side or the other side, one party or the other. Individually, we must, within our sphere of influence, change the people first in our sphere of influence. So if I'm a candidate of the Liberal Party, I want to make sure that the Liberal Party slowly begins to speak the words of Christ. And knowing that there is no individual politician who will exemplify Christ-likeness in every single part of his platform. Okay, so we must never be polarized to a point where we divide each other because you're liberal, you're conservative, you're NDP, and I don't talk to you anymore. We're Christians. We must be Christ-like and accept that each of us may see different parts of political platforms, but together, whether as Christians in this party or that party, together as Christians, we will change our country and our society. And some people might say, okay, politics is not for me. That's a very difficult space. I can be a teacher and do things as a teacher. Do right things as a teacher. I can be a contractor, I can be a realtor, I can be a swimming coach, whatever. Each person in your own job influence that person that you can influence, and that's enough. Salt. Just a few grains of salt can change the flavor of the food. Any questions? And Alice, so back to you. That question
Yeah, you have answered.
answered it, yeah? Okay, all right.